Thank you, Mr. Molnax. Thank you, Mr. Rector. So we don't, looks like we do not have any public for public testimony, so we will move on. Tonight, we will have discussion of the preliminary 2023-2024 budget. And so we'll now turn it over to our superintendent, Mrs. Cook.
Well, good evening. It's good to see all of you here. We put at your place a little agenda of the different topics we're going to cover this evening. So we're just going to jump right in. Feel free to stop us at any time. This is a little more informal than normal as a workshop, even though we're seated in this manner. So feel free to stop and ask for clarification if you have questions. A lot of what we're doing tonight is letting you know where we are at this point in the budget process. And then we can get in questions from you or thoughts from you, so that as we continue to work on this for another month, as we prepare what the final proposal will be, that we've all worked together to get there. So as part of the overview, I wish I was coming and saying the legislative session has been good to all districts in the state of Texas and is going to equitably fund public education, but that is not the case at this point. So we're hearing that another session special session is going to be called, but it has not been done as of the last time I looked. So there's still a lot out there being discussed about what the potential for some more budgeting or more revenue for school districts could be. So we remain hopeful that we might receive something, but at this point we need to build off of what we know. So as we always do every year, when you build a school budget, it's one of the most difficult to build because you're building off of projections. Everything from our taxable tax rates or what our revenue is still preliminary, in preliminary phase. We've not received those finals yet. We're working off of using all the data that we have to look at our projections for our enrollment, looking at what's been happening historically over the past year to 2 years to determine what our ADA is going to be, and then trying to project forward of how many students might show up and will we need more teachers, and trying to keep those low teacher to student ratios in classrooms. So it's very difficult, but this is something, I guess since the beginning of public education, that we build off of preliminary numbers, preliminary data, using our best estimates and projections to try to build a healthy, balanced budget is always our goal. So tonight we want to just start by going over some different documents so that you can see what it's looking like at this point, what is shaking out, and then we can start talking about next steps as we continue to work towards what the budget will finally look like. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Stansberry, and she's going to look at the comparison of your certified tax year 2022 to your preliminary tax year 2023.
In your document, the left-hand side are the certified values from last year, and then the right side are the preliminary values that we received April the 25th. And since we're in 3 counties, I just need to remind you that's why we have this big spreadsheet, because we have to add all 3 counties together to get our values. The front page, the very first page, I have included the way each county has the property divided between land improvements, personal property, minerals, and then thus the exemptions towards the bottom. It's by county. And on the very, very far right column is the difference between last year's certified and what they've given us as preliminary. I'll give you a little bit of time to look at that. The preliminary values are under the ARB review in each county, and they will be certifying their values that they have approved by, well, they're required to by July the 25th. So that's the date we're shooting for, that we'll know what they're going to certify, and then we'll revamp our numbers and start nailing our tax revenue estimates down really tight. On the front page, the very bottom line in the green, that's the grand totals of the values, and the next to the last column, or the very last column, shows you how much our preliminary values are increasing over the certified from last year.
Any questions, board members, on page 1?
Now, yeah, I know the state was looking at something, and the governor and the legislature was talking about some tax decreases in homestead and bringing down the taxes on property taxes. Did they make any decisions on that, or
No.
is that still open?
They are still discussing that. Like the increased homestead exemption, I'm trying to watch out for more information. They have not passed that. The other thing they were wanting to do is they've started the tax compression of our taxable rate, and it's in relation to how much our values go up. So our values between preliminary and last year's certified, at this point, it's $261,589,000 increase over last year's values. So that's way above the threshold that they allow for tax compression. We're at the maximum tax compression. We're way over 30% increase. So basically, this is the same law that's been in place. What has been in discussion in the legislature is increasing how much the compression is going to go up, but they have not decided anything. That's all still in committees. And
Thank you.
Juanice, do you mind reading just for the public record what that increase is from certified to preliminary? That way people that are listening will have an idea of what we're talking about.
So for the tax year 2022, the totals of the certified totals for all 3 entities, Sanpat County, Aransas County, and Oasis County, the totals are $1,135,149,101. Again, that's the grand total net taxable value before the freeze. The preliminary for tax year 2023, again, all 3, the same 3 entities, the total net taxable value before freeze is $1,396,738,345, which leaves a difference of $261,589,244, which comes out to 23.0445% increase over last tax year. Again, these are preliminary numbers. And these are preliminary numbers as of what? Was that May? These
when
numbers?
they released them was April.
April.
Yes.
April of this year.
And in May is when they started their board hearings. So we'll see in July how that plays out.
In July? Okay. Do we have any questions on the certified roll or the preliminary roll? Again, this is the comparison of certified tax year 2022 to preliminary tax year 2023. I'll turn it back over to staff if you'd like to continue on, please.
On the second page, this is related totally to the freeze adjustments that they make, where we have our people that are 65 or over, that their taxes are frozen. We still collect taxes on that value. So there's a second portion or session that we look at that this actually, they give us specific numbers in certified, and they give us the specific numbers in our preliminary numbers. They give us our frozen, adjusted taxable value, and then they apply our tax rate, which last year our total tax rate with M&O and INS was 0.991123. Because our values are going up, our M&O tax rate is getting compressed all the way down. And at the top of the page where there's pink, our M&O projected rate, that is our new compressed rate, is 0.7997. That is our compressed rate, which is actually 0.7497. And then there's 5 what they call golden pennies that we're allowed to just add right back. And that is including the golden pennies. When you apply the new tax rate of 0.936223, the tax levy on values, those are the numbers. San Pat County tax levy on values would be $9,330,000, and then so forth across to the right, which would have a tax levy total of $11,461,105. The next line is add back the ceilings. What that is what they're estimating that we will collect on the frozen values. That's the taxes that we would collect. And we're allowed to add that back in to the other previous total of 11 million. So our estimated tax levy at this point would be $12,594,262. And that is total tax levy, that's M&O and INS. And below that, I have come up with a formula that breaks out your INS and L&M tax, your local maintenance tax. And this is what I put in to our estimated revenue page that will be following this.
So the difference between last tax year of 2022 and what is proposed for the tax year 2023 on our estimated tax levy with adjustments, the difference is going to be $1,752,649. Correct?
469.
Yes, ma'am.
469.
And Cheryl, that's a comparison between the estimated tax levy. That's not the actual for 2022, correct? That's what the projected was for that school year, for last school
On the
year?
left-hand side of the
Yes.
column, the certified, yes, sir. We estimated $10,841,793, and the actual tax levy that y'all approved was $10,857,296. We were pretty close.
And the golden 5 pennies you were talking about, that has to occur by board action, correct? That's not necessarily an absolute, but
That it does not have to have a TRE. And when you approve the tax rate, it is part of the tax rate that you approve, yes, sir.
Which that will be at our August, after our public hearing
In your
and so forth.
August meeting, yes, ma'am.
Our August meeting. Any other comments, staff, on the adjusted taxable values here? Estimated tax levies from last year to proposed?
All my years.
Any
of
comments or questions from board members?
All the years of experience I've had with these budget stuff, this is all I will change next week.
Due to the legislative session and,
Due to our,
special sessions?
yeah,
He wants, I know the governor wants to do some stuff there, and he wants the taxes lowered, and he's got the voucher and everything else he's trying to get through, he's trying to support, so.
So again, for the viewing public, these are preliminary estimates and projections that are subject to change depending any other guidance or so forth that may come through from Austin.
Yeah, is there any idea when, they're gonna make the decisions and give us this final, they could do it after we approve it, right? They could come back and change it, and say, a special session. I mean, the governor can call special sessions rest of this year, I guess, so.
They called the first special session, but they're talking about calling a second,
Yeah,
and I'm not sure what date that has to happen. End of this month, I thought.
their deadlines don't meet our deadlines, so.
yeah, I know,
I mean,
Yeah.
history tells you that.
yeah.
Yeah,
Some districts have their budget starts July 1, so they're already having to move and
Yep,
approve based on just projections.
yep. Okay, thank you.
Any other board comments, questions, concerns? Okay, staff, if you will continue on with the handouts provided. Yeah, it looks like that, yes, the next item is projected ADA comparison.
we built the budget last year on 1555 point, and it rounded up to 1556. And we're ending this year prior to the final numbers going into TEA to do whatever they want to do with our numbers. We're projecting a 1581 ADA. Since our enrollment has really, once it hit 1,700, it has been staying just a little bit above 1,700. And we're trying to be conservative with our attendance rate. We'd love for it to be 95%, but and we are getting there, but we're planning that 1,700 enrollment with a 93% attendance rate. And when you plug that number in into our template, that helps drive the numbers starting with state aid. All the numbers in the top half, and I'm actually going to go ahead and plunge on into the rest of the document.
Okay,
The tax income, that 10,650,000 comes straight from my spreadsheet of the taxable values. And historically, we've been collecting in the range of $250,000 in delinquent taxes for M&O. And then our penalty interest is around between $150,000, $175,000. So we're estimating that our tax revenue is going to be $11,075,149. And then interest income, that, we've been having a lot of increases in our interest rates, and our interest that we've earned this year is really right at 140,000 already before the end of the year's over. And then our miscellaneous income and athletic receipts is pretty steady, right at 60,000. So I've left them alone. So total income, we're estimating 11,340,149. So local income is an increase of $1,530,000. That will be changing when we get our certified values, our tax year, tax revenue, current tax revenue will be changing.
What was the rationale from going from last year, a 94% attendance rate, to this year dropping to a 93% attendance rate?
It was just trying to be conservative. Although our tax rate, we are maybe having a discussion about revising that some. Because our yeah.
I think, last year, we talked about this during the board meeting, that we went down to 94%, be conservative, thinking we'd meet that. And we had trouble this year making 94%. I don't know what our final ADA was, but it was very close to 94%. So, sometimes, it was like 93 point something. So again, that's what we, based upon the numbers we have for this year and what, the students aren't coming back like they were before the pandemic. So, we were like 95 or 96% before the pandemic. So
We'll tell you that the discussions from the commissioner, listening to what they're looking at doing, is they're going to also be very conservative. So in the template, we're waiting on a TEA template to drop for us to look at this. And just this morning I was listening to the rationale for that is because across the state, the attendance averages have been below average. And so the state on the template, they're going, because we can go in and you can project out where you think your ADA and your enrollment's going to be. But what I'm understanding that they're about to do, TEA is going to take that, and even though you may have projected out a higher rate, they're going to drop it back because they control that. All we can do is we can put in what we believe is going to happen, and they're all projections. But what I was hearing the last two meetings with the commissioner have been they're going to take that and they're going to adjust it back because across the state they're not seeing that. And so what's going to happen is they're going to fund us on the state revenue side based on those lower projections. And then if we hit higher, then they'll settle up with us at the end of the year. So as we're building budgets, we're finding that it's probably wise to build on the conservative side because we're probably not going to see that money come in from the state, or it's going to come in at a lower level. So that then starts hurting your cash flow problems and starts getting you into issues where you don't have the funding to cover a budget you built because they're going to cut us short. And that's coming from several different perspectives that we're hearing right now. And what we just faced the past 2 years, and that, we had money and then they took some back and then they gave it, they're going to, we have this huge settle up that's supposed to come to us in September. It seems to be this method right now, I guess I would say, that the state is holding back and they're only going to pay out, and this is my perspective from what we felt this 2 years, they're going to pay out after the fact. And when we talked to Leo Lopez at TEA, he even stated to us, when Cheryl and I were talking to him about when they took that 1 point something, we thought we were going to have it and then they removed it and so forth, he said, I said, what are districts supposed to do? I said, we build these budgets off of what is on our summary of finance, and then you come back as a TEA and you start changing those calculations. And then we have to try to adjust. I said, but we've already started our budget year. We have our salaries. We have all, everything we need to pay. And his statement to us was, that is what your fund balance is for, to get you through those times until you have settled up. And that was just as point blank as he was. And I thought, well, I don't know what else to do with that, but that's straight from TEA.
So when you talked about the two commissioner meetings and the what's coming in, that they were going to reduce ADA, the average daily attendance, what about on the enrollment side? Because we had budgeted a conservative number for enrollment, but actually it was higher.
Yes, and so that's where our settle up will come for in September. That's where we're should be getting a large amount. And of course, I'm kind of now, when we see it hit the bank, that's when I will personally believe it. But we should have a large settle up for that. Our projections now enrollment should be more in line. So I didn't hear anything where they were going to compress your enrollment numbers, because those are what they are. The attendance rate is what's difficult to project, because you may have 1,700 students, but you don't know if those 1,700 students are going to, if they're going to all decide this next year, yes, we're ready to go back to school and we're back up to our original 95, 96%, or we're still going to see this complacency and apathy that we seem to be seeing across the state, where we'll go to school, not feel, whatever their reasons are, they're not attending school at the rate that they were pre-COVID, and that's across the state.
Now, I've seen some other legislation. I don't know if they passed this or not, but you can tell me that they were talking about basing the funding on enrollment versus ADA. Did they make a decision on that, or just back to ADA?
It failed, and
Okay.
so unless they revive it somewhere, it failed. We were really pushing for that, because we felt like you should base it. That is a better way to build a budget. You can, because we know that we had a good 1,700 consistently throughout last year. So without some major something happening here, we should be at 1,700 and continuing to grow, because house tops are still coming up. So that you can build a budget off very nicely. But when you have to put that attendance rate, which is such a variable, then you're kind of rolling dice with that. And we were hoping they would understand that, but unless it revives itself in this next session, it seemed like it was dead.
Thank you.
Okay, the next portion of the document is our state aid. That's tier 1. This comes straight off of what we call a document, a summary of finance, and where these numbers come from actual enrollment in our different programs. The number, they call them an FTE, is the special education population generates 1,373,000. We get our money allotment for dyslexia, and then our comp ed students. It used to be free and reduced lunch. Now TEA actually has everyone put in a GPS, and it's we get funding according to where the student lives, at their actual address. And then we get money for bilingual. And then early education allotment, that's our enrollment of kindergarten through 3rd grade. And then they've added, they cut the GT allotment several years ago, but they brought it back. And then our CCMR bonus, and then the school safety allotment. I do need to speak a little bit about that. This is old law, the $15,810. We're being told that they did pass some of the safety allotment rules and funding for it. They passed that we would get $15,000 per campus, and then $10 per ADA. And the $15,000 per campus with 4, that would increase it to $60,000, and then $10 for ADA, that'd be another $15,000. So possibly have a funding of $75,800. But I'm not getting too excited about that, because it's tied to specific ways to be spent in, and it's not already in our budget. It has to be added to our budget, so it will be a wash. But that is one thing we need to be looking at. And then transportation. As far as I know, they are really, I don't know, but have you heard anything if they increased our mileage? They'd pay us like maybe 10 cents on a mile. But all of those populations generate what they call the total cost of tier 1, which is $14,179,276.
Before you move on, when you were talking about the school safety allotment, potentially increasing to $75,800, when that happens, will we have to come back and amend here, or will we have a new line item to track that? Because if it's tied to certain types of expenditures.
Well, no, all of these have to be, all of these are tied to a specific type of expenditure with a program intent code. So when we bring this to you to pass the budget, it will already be updated in our revenue, and then it will be in our budget already.
But will this, right now it reads, our school safety allotment of $15,810. So will that change to $75,800? It will.
It was not in the template. Omar Garcia is the one who developed the template that we used to generate this document. And when he updated it, he had not updated the safety portion yet, because I think he's waiting for the final interpretation of what the legislature intended.
That is correct, because today we discussed that.
Oh, okay.
There were still some, like she said, interpretations to be made. Even today, we were standing in the hallway and we said, well, it's 28 cents here. No, he said it's $10. So we were even interpreting different things about the documents we were reading. So we're waiting on the final interpretation. Omar usually doesn't put it in the template until he fully feels like that's what it is, because he doesn't want to give us false hope or just the opposite.
And a lot of that safety is going to be specified for specific things.
Yes.
You can't use it for other things other than that one thing. If you don't use it, you lose it, I guess. So, you know.
Yes, they're mandating specific ways of how we spend it. The very next line, the local share, that comes from what the state says that we have to collect towards taxes, and it's our portion of what education costs. So it gets subtracted off of our state funding, because they're saying we're responsible for raising that amount of money. And then we have our per capita distribution. We have the foundation fund that we get our large monies from, and then we have an available fund, and I'm not sure exactly how to explain that. It's a separate fund that is run off ADA and values. What they do with that is they're subtracting that also from our state funding, because it's not foundation. They do add it back down a little bit later under other programs. They add it back, so it's a wash. The bottom line, our state funding that we're expecting is the $5,725,765.
And this is still tier 1?
That's tier 1, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Well, yes. The TRS on behalf, that next line of $954,000 is actually a bookkeeping line for the state. We have to book this so the state will know how much in TRS funds that is going to be their liability. So we book that as a revenue, but it's a wash because we also book it as an expense, so they wash each other out. So our total state income would be $6,679,000, and bringing the total state and local income of $18,019,914. Then we do have some federal monies. Our E-rate reimbursement, we get reimbursed for what we pay for telephone service, and it's used to be a lot more money, but the last few years it's been approximately $30,000. And then SHARS, this is the federal funding that we get. We provide Medicaid services that we have for special ed students, and we get reimbursed from the government for that. And then our NJROTC, our reimbursement that we expect to get towards their salaries is $85,000. And then our QZAB loan, the interest, we get to book that as a revenue, but it is also a wash because we book it as an expense. So actually, our total income that we're estimating for this year is gonna be $18,264,914, which is an increase over last year's revenue of $1,156,100. Yes, and the 354, Ms. Butler did a lot better reading the long numbers than I did. So basically, that's what we're gonna be adding to last year's budget. Last year, we had a balanced budget of the $17,108,560, and that's our starting point for what I'm gonna actually turn over to Ms. Kara, is the 17,108 budget that we had is our starting point, and then how we're gonna spend the additional $1,154,000 is through employees, salaries, and the like. And I know Ms. Kara has a list.
So do y'all have
To
any
share
more
with you.
questions on this before we move to that?
Yes. So under the tier 1 for state aid, do we not receive any mentor program allotments?
Any what?
Mentor program allotments for our teachers who are mentoring
No,
beginner
that's just
teachers?
Part of our salary
Okay.
estimates.
Have we applied for those before, those mentoring grant dollars?
I'm not aware that there's additional money for mentoring.
There used to be a number of years back, because when I was at the junior high, that we actually had mentors. The state paid for it, but it's only like a 3 or 4 year program that they did away with because it was a good program and it was working, so they just did away with it. So,
I mean,
yeah.
we've had several grants that we've used that were, but they're not part of the this local budget. They're grant-funded positions where, when we did coaching our teachers, through some of the T-class funding, we did have mentoring that was done for teachers. Our Grow Your Own program has mentoring included, but those are all grant-funded positions that are totally separate from this.
Okay. I only asked because I recently did a TEA training and they had that as one of the tier 1 allotment items, that it was $1,800 per teacher for mentoring a beginner teacher.
Well, we will definitely look into it.
I don't know if it's I know a lot has changed over the last year or so, so I don't know if it's something they've done away with, or if we have to do additional things to be a part of it, but it was included in there, so I was just curious.
Well, it shouldn't be, because these are state aid funded line items that are set, that are in the template, so I'm not aware.
I took the online course as well on school finance, and it's still listed in there.
Okay.
Now,
Well, we will look
I
and
don't
see.
know.
Was it in there at one time, Kara?
I've never seen it in there.
Because this template just falls down from the state, so any category of any funds that are coming
Yes.
in are gonna be default on that template. It's not gonna be an extra line item that is discretionary.
but we could put it in ours, right, add it to, as another section if we receive additional revenue from other
This was
sources
22.
that are outside of the template.
Are
To
we
use-
talking template or are we talking budget? Because that can be two different things. The
Well,
template's
right.
gonna fall down, and then whatever our budget is, we could have a line item.
Because isn't
For
the template
mentoring.
just for the state aid?
Just for the state aid.
Right, so in our local part of our budget, we can expand that, right, we can expand that.
That'd be two that'd be two different.
Because we have separate, so once we build the budget, then we take this, $17 million, and it's broken out into all the different categories, line items, budget codes. So you have salaries is where most of it is, and you might have curriculum and instruction, athletic programs. So, and within curriculum and instruction, you could have, we could have mentoring in there. So we could say we want X number of dollars allotted to that.
Okay.
But as far as it being in the template, we haven't seen it, but we will all look for it tomorrow.
No problem. And I'll show you guys before I leave what I'm talking about.
It shouldn't- I mean,
Just in
normally-
case.
the template's not something we put the categories in. The categories are there. They plug the numbers in. So that's why we were all like, we don't know why it's not there. If there's such
No,
a
I
thing.
understand.
Before moving away from this page, and you taking us through that 1.5 million, so just to clarify, when you said that our total income will increase from last year, projected rather, estimated for our upcoming year, that it increases by 1,156,354, that's not because of the state aid. That's because our local dollars are projected or estimated to increase. Because we go back up to the total local income line item towards the top of this estimated calculation, there's 1,530,251. Okay.
Isn't that gonna be a direct effect of your increased values? That's where we're seeing that. All the growth that's happening, our values are going up. And once our values go up, your tax assessment's gonna increase the income. So that's where the biggest chunk of that money's coming from.
And then when your tax values go up, your state aid goes down.
Goes down.
And that's what usually that's why we tend to be, it's like, you would think, oh, because when you look at that first sheet, you're like, oh man, this second sheet's gonna look really good. We're gonna really rock it this year, but that's not the way this works,
Okay.
unfortunately. Okay, any other questions on that part? We can always go back. Something we say here may have you want to go back, so. So on the next page, what we're trying to do, and remember, we're working off of preliminary numbers. There's still a lot of unknowns, and we're hopeful that there's going to be some assistance from the state. But right now, we're having to look at what do we know at this moment? What does it look like? It's how it's going to shake out. I know one of your big questions and one of our big tasks was that as our ESSER funding is coming to a close, that it's time, how do we move that back into our local budget? So if you'll remember, when we received the ESSER funding for the opportunity to, it was all put out, the federal funding was put out there to help with our closing the gaps, all that happened with COVID, and so forth. Districts had some leadway in how to use it. We stayed used it for maybe ACs, school buses, and so forth. We really felt the need to focus in on the academic portion of it, so we tried to use those dollars in that way to support our teachers, our staff through the coaching, the mentoring, providing, keeping that 22-to-1 class ratio, providing those supplies and the training and the support, and extra personnel to help the at-risk students that were coming back to us in masses. So basically, this is the year where that's coming to a close now. So what does that look like? And so we've been watching this very, very closely over the 2 years, because even when they first gave it, they gave us many workshops on be careful, because there will be the ESSER cliff. And be careful, don't come to the ESSER cliff and fall off of it. Be prepared. So we've been trying to work very carefully and project out so that once we got to this point, that we could do it, make it a smooth transition back. We also, just as a kind of a historical reminder, learned in the midst of that we kept waiting for the hold harmless because of our ADA declining, our enrollment declining. Our enrollment didn't decline quite as bad, but it did decline during that period, but our enrollment definitely did, which hurt our state funding. So that was another big question we were asking, well, where's our hold harmless? They said, we're going to hold you harmless. Well, they kind of threw some pennies at us, if you remember, didn't cover the loss that was felt. And so that was another thing that came from the commissioner, and Mr. Lopez at TEA said the ESSER funding is your hold harmless. So if you're falling short, use your fund balance, use your ESSER funding, and that is where you're supposed to make sure you're held harmless through these tough times. That's why you're being given these funds to do that. So that's where we pivoted to make sure that we could keep keep the school running at the level we wanted and continue to make it through those 2 very tough years. So with that said, you'll see here, basically, I tried to just do a simple breakdown, and then we can go deeper into it, but I'm just going to kind of go through it and give you some information, and then we can circle back around and answer your particular questions. So at the top, you see a projected increase in local revenue. Basically, I took that number from this sheet, that 1.156354. That's what we're projecting at this point. That can change, and we are hopeful that that's going to increase, but we do not know that. So we're working with that number at this time. The ESSER salaries that we had left, that were in the local budget, that we're looking at needing to be absorbed, were $831,956. Now, what I want to share with you, though, that was not the total ESSER. So this is what we ended with that we felt need to come back over. And this is what that includes. So I'm going to kind of give you some breakdown on that. The actual ESSER salaries that were budgeted for 22-23 were $1,178,216. $1,178,216. That was the actual salaries that were in ESSER for this past school year. So as we move forward in our planning and our watching, we had already planned that we knew there were certain positions in that 1.1 million that we were going to close. Those positions knew they were federally funded. They knew that they had 2, maybe 3 years, and then they would be terminated. The position would be closed, which I don't like to use the word terminated, but those positions would be closed. So from that 1.1 ESSER salary budgets, we closed up $346,260. That's the amount that we closed that will no longer be in existence for this next year. Those included RTI clerks, because we'd put clerks in due to all the massive paperwork and the tracking and all of that had to be done. We absorbed that into some other positions. We have some software programs we feel like that we really understand and can handle it now. So those were some positions we felt like, because we had to cut somewhere, and so we wanted to cut where it would least affect the students first and foremost and still support our teachers. We have a math lab position we closed. We actually couldn't even find fill it, so that worked out. Literary specialist area was closed, and a lot of that will be done through our dyslexic program now. Director of nursing, that position was closed. We no longer will have a director of nursing. So those were some of the positions that were closed. Then we also had some that we moved to other federal funding, like an at-risk liaison. We felt it was important to keep that position due to the mental health needs, but we had title funding, and so we're using title funding that fit that need. So we were able to keep the position but move it out of local. We have an LSSP, which is also to help us with our special ed mental health wellness, and that will be kept. That position will be kept, but it will be used. Special ed funding will be taking care of that. And then we had some more funding in title, so we moved one of our teacher salaries over into that. So once we did close those that I mentioned, move these others to federal funds, that came out to that $346,260.
Kara, I have a question.
Yes.
And you just help me understand. You said the nursing director.
Yes.
The nursing director had always been part of our regular budget, so how are we using ESSER funds for that position?
Well, I'm in a moment you're going to see. I can go ahead and jump there. Don't think that'll mess anything up. So in ESSER, because of the hold harmless part this past year, in order for us to be able to keep the ship upright, we had to move some of our local salaries into ESSER. Remember, we showed y'all that. I know it's a lot of stuff to remember. And so director of nursing was one of the positions, and actually 3 other nurse positions were paid out of ESSER this past year. They were not paid out of local. The superintendent, my salary was paid out of ESSER. The assistant superintendent salary was paid out of ESSER, and so were the 3 of our counselors. That total came out to without the director of nursing, because I put that up there, but these other superintendent, assistant sup, 3 nurses, director of nursing, 3 counselors. I had it down here too. That was $538,288.
Hold on one second. You're going faster than I can type.
I'm sorry.
I don't have a pen, so I'm typing. 1 second.
That
Yeah,
was how much?
538,288. Those were ESSER positions that were moved from local. And so that was part of that 1.178.
Three nurses, 3 counselors.
3 nurses, 3 counselors.
Soup, assistant soup, and the director of
Yes.
nursing.
So that 538,288 was originally local, was positions to be locally funded, but because of the shortfall that we had from the state aid, we used ESSER funding to close, to cover that for this past year. That was our hold harmless, I guess you could say. That's where we did the hold harmless there.
How much is the cost for those 3 positions that were moved from local to other funding? You mentioned the at-risk liaison, 1 teacher.
It's part of this 346, I would tell you, but for something happened to my computer and it's spinning now, my spreadsheet, I can't see it.
Okay.
I don't know what's going on. I
Now-
touched it in it, so I can get that for you, but I just did totals. They're part of that 346,260. And then you also have added positions that we put in during COVID, and we see the need to keep, are in the amount of $293,668.
Could you repeat that, please?
293,668. And this included 3 teachers, 3 paras, and assistant principal at the high school. We based this need off of, this was going to come with our enrollment increase. Our enrollment has increased from May of 2019 of 1535 to May of 2023, 1704. I believe that's 170 students. So these 3 teachers, 3 paras, and our need for the assistant principal due to the growth that we have, we, looking at our numbers, our FTEs, and making sure that we're meeting the needs of our students, this amount we felt needs to be kept in as we move forward. So
The
to kind
assistant that you're talking about is where?
I'm sorry?
The assistant that you're talking about? You
At the
said
high school,
So you still want 2 assistants at the high schools, which you're budgeting for?
yes.
But
And
right
what
now,
we-
we've only contracted with 1.
I'm sorry?
We've only contracted with 1. Do we have both under contract?
Yes, sir.
Who
Yes,
was the
we've already
second one
approved
Who was
those.
the second one that we put under contract?
Stacy Ostrom and Michael Todd will be the assistant principals, and Josh Rums will be the
So
principal.
basically, we're saying maintaining the second
Yes,
assistant
yes.
principal that was
Yes,
used
I'm
through
sorry,
ESSER
yes.
funds, okay.
Yeah, it's just, I guess I'm just saying we didn't have that prior to COVID, and those are some positions, the 3 teachers, the 3 paras, and the assistant principal that rose up during COVID that we used ESSER funds for, and we, as the admin team, as we looked through all this, felt that this was the best thing moving forward.
So, help me remember here, but for some reason I've got lagging in my mind that when we talked about this in a previous meeting, we talked about the DAP coordinator that we had.
Yes.
That we were no longer gonna need that position.
Right.
And that by eliminating that would allow us to transfer funds and be able to afford the assistant principal job, which was Miss whatever her name is. Ostrom.
That is
Those-
correct.
So then why would we need to use an increase in our funds that we're having to pay for that position if we've already accounted for it?
Well, because what I'm gonna show you here in a moment, you're gonna see it shakes out.
Okay.
Okay? So I'm just trying to give you some background on the ESSER, because I know that was a huge question for all of you. What did that look like, and where are we going with it? So if you hold that thought just 1 minute, and I think I can answer that. But before we go on that, just to kind of recap, so on the ESSER, it was 1.178216. That's what we had in ESSER salaries last year. We closed out or moved to federal funds a total of 346,260. And I hope my math's right. This is why I'm not the business manager, but I think I crunched this enough times. And then the positions we're wanting to keep are the 293,668. And then just kind of breaking all this down, and then the ESSER positions that we need to move back to local were the 538,288. And so if I did that right, that should be 293 and 538 should, if you go back to that other sheet, is your 831,956. That is our ESSER salaries to be absorbed back into the local budget.
Do you have a sheet that summarizes all that for us?
I have my sheet. I can send it to you. I should have made a copy of this for you, but I was trying to do my notes and I didn't think about making you a copy of this, but I can get you this.
If you could, so that there's not confusion, because when we talk about paying ESSER-funded positions,
Yes.
we did two things. We established positions that we did not have before ESSER. All right, so are those the 7 that you just told us about, the 3
Yes.
teachers, 3 paras, and 1 assistant principal?
Yes.
But did not we have the literacy?
Yes. I'm saying those are the ones we want to keep.
Okay.
The ESSER closed were the 346. That's where you had the RTI clerks, the math lab, the literary specialists, and that were a part of that were closed.
Okay. On the sheet that you're going to share with us, can you just list which ones were truly ESSER? Because we did 2 things. We brought new positions with ESSER dollars for the first time. Those positions did not exist here. And then, like other districts, we used ESSER funds to cover the cost of existing positions,
Yes.
pre-ESSER, pre-COVID positions.
Right. And that's here, and that's
Okay.
I basically have said that, but let me say it again. So ESSER positions that we added were RTI clerks, at-risk liaison, math lab, literary specialists, and LSSP. Teacher, one of our let's see, that would come down to 4 teachers, 3 paras, and assistant principal.
Okay.
Those
What's
were
the Army office? We had
included
the
in your
director.
ESSER closed and your ESSER added. So I kind of divided them into, but that's the whole list. And then your ESSER positions moved from local that were here previously were the superintendent, assistant superintendent, 3 nurses, director of nursing, and 3 counselors. Is that kind of
So that's
cleaner?
9. Okay.
Yeah.
9 positions. Okay.
But we're not going to have a director of nursing
No.
moving forward.
Okay.
Okay, is that clear as mud? No, that's a lot of numbers. Yeah, I was trying to think of the cleanest way to do this because this has been a task. So if you go back to the other sheet, now you have the 831,956. Those are those salaries, the positions that we had prior to COVID that we're trying to move back, and then these 3 teachers, 3 paras, and assistant principal that we're wishing to keep due to our enrollment now and move back. So that's where that number comes from. Then the local salary changes, to Mr. Galvan's question, the 119,376. So we basically, the spreadsheet I can't see right now because my computer's spinning, is we have been going through, and as we have made changes, so because as you know, we had a lot of retirements this year, and so teachers that were retiring were at the top of the pay scale, and then as we had other teachers come in, most of them are 0 to 5 year teachers. So there's quite a difference in their salaries. So we've kept a spreadsheet based off of if you went out at 65 and we hired a $35,000 teacher in, then what was our savings, you might say. So to his point, when we absorbed and we made, we now have Mr. O'Brien is still over at DAP, but he's serving as a coordinator over and coordinator / teacher. So he's actually, we've absorbed into that, so we don't have a campus principal there. You don't have because there was really not a need to do it that way. So we restructured that to do it in what still runs very smoothly, very well. And then one of the assistant principals from the high school, because we also have CTE classes over there with our health science and welding. So Mr. Romes will decide which he may want to do it himself or one of his APs. They will oversee that campus now. The AEP and the CTE go over, check on it, make sure things are going. So they'll be the administrator. So we didn't need to keep that level. So we took the current administrator and we spread that out to become a coordinator / teacher in that. So that was a savings for us. So that's where that savings came. Does that make sense, or did I muddy that up even more?
I just don't follow the rationale. I mean, different ways of doing it, I guess. But I mean, if you had a coordinator with Mr. O'Brien and you've moved him to a coordinator and you didn't have an assistant principal, you had one assistant principal at the high school, but now you're saying there's a need for two.
Yes.
But there's a need for two at the high school for two assistants, but yet half their duties are gonna be at the DAEP and the,
Well, not necessarily half, they will oversee, but you have high school students that are over there, and most DAPs are run in that manner. There is not, you don't have a principal at a campus where you have approximately 20 students. That's just not a good use of your personnel, your FTEs. So in the end, it is a great savings. It's basically an entire FTE, a teacher's salary that has been saved by doing it this way. And then you're able to have that support that we need at the high school campus with, as you know, with all of our vaping issues that we're having, our social emotional wellness needs that we have. We need to make sure that we're covering all of that and meeting all of those needs. And our on that campus, it was there were at points this year it was over 500 students back on that campus.
Just for clarification, what was the what title or position out of the DAEP program is being used to pay for the assistant principal position at the high school?
What position?
Mm-hmm.
We absorbed a teacher that was at that position, and now Mr. O'Brien is now has some oversight of the initial program that they use, the Edgenuity, and he's also the teacher now. He's the teacher of the class.
So there was an administrator and a teacher
Yes.
at DAP? Okay, so it's the...
And a para.
Okay, so the administrator position and the para are gone out of the DAP, and those are the funds that are being used to
Well,
pay
it's
for the
actually
assistant
the
principal?
teacher's position is the one that's completely gone. And then we repurposed the former administrator to a coordinator / teacher.
And what about the para position?
Para is still there, and we just have one, right? Okay, make sure.
Okay, so the teacher position is gone.
Yes.
The administrator has been reclassified, is that a
Yes.
better word? To be a coordinator / teacher.
Right.
Para's still there. Okay, so with the restructuring of the DAEP program, those salary savings,
Are reflective in this 119.
right, but is that enough to cover the assistant principal position at the high school?
Not completely, no.
Okay, that's where I was getting a little confused as to how in adding the positions that were added during COVID, and if those are going to be absorbed into the local budget to keep them, how we're actually funding those.
Right. Well, yeah, but if you're trying to look for match to, penny to penny, say, well, we absorbed that one and it took care of this one. There's really no way to do that because there's no two salaries that are exactly alike, or very few would be exactly alike. So we do it in the overall picture, and that's what I'm giving you here, is we have $831,000 that needs to be absorbed back. We, at this point, and we're still working on these numbers, and this is going to change, and this 119 is going to increase, actually. Could increase, because we're still working on maintenance and transportation. We didn't, we have Mr. Diven is restructuring, and so we're going to have quite substantial savings here, but we don't have that tonight for your first budget workshop because we're still working on that restructuring. So tonight, for just your first look at it, we're at 119. And then we all have our projected salary benefits off of the difference of those two, because that just includes their base salary. And then, so that's how we've come up with this at this point. Then you have your property insurance premium increase. We're being told we need to, is this 20%? Is that what this is? 20% again, is what Chase is telling us needs to occur, which is, this is becoming very problematic for all the districts on the coast. And so when we take so what you're basically looking at, and I want to kind of finish that out, and then we can circle back around. Maybe it'll help with the picture. What we're looking at here is trying to give you, with the local revenue that we have at this time, which could change and hopefully increase, with the ESSER salaries that we're trying to move back into the budget, the changes that we have, the 119, which are that's going to look even better. Then that horrible 240 that we have to have for the insurance premium. Right now, today, with these very preliminary numbers, we're looking at only $132,516 left to even begin to talk about any type of salary raises and so forth. So that's what I think. I mean, I can appreciate all the very deep dive questions, and we'll dive as deep as y'all want to, but I think tonight what we were trying to show you, because I think you need to digest that first, because that's big. And that's a big thing to think about, and that's something that's causing us pause as we look at it and how we keep working with this to what money will we have left on the table then to begin to bring back to you by the second workshop what type of salary increases we could even potentially do.
So without diving too deep, I've got to ask this question. It's just,
Oh no, dive deep. I didn't mean don't dive deep. I just I just wanted
Well,
to get the big picture first.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It's a lot of information to digest.
Yes.
But just let me play devil's advocate. Had we not had a big increase in our taxable appraised values, the $333,684,000 that afforded us the increase that we have of the 1.1. If that didn't happen, let's say the area just went stagnant this year and we didn't have this increase, we'd be in a lot of trouble. We wouldn't have the $1.1 million to absorb these, hold on one second, to absorb the assistant principal job or the three, let's see, where is it? 3 teachers, 3 professionals, and assistant principal that were pre-COVID. We wouldn't be able to absorb that $293,000, and somehow we would still move on, and still the doors would stay open, and we'd keep educating our kids. The approximately $300,000 that we're talking about, another way that you could look at it is it's another $300,000 that we could have available for our funds for raises if we didn't have these positions and weren't bringing them back.
Well, yes, you're right, but I was working off the premise too that since I've been here, our topic has always been that we want to keep low classroom teacher ratio. And that is one of the big selling points that we have here, because we are not competitive with our salaries, but because we do keep a lower class size ratio here, that is, you know, when you have an increase from 1535 to 1704, and if you divide that out, that's less than a 20, that's more than a 22-1 ratio that we've even, by putting those 3 teachers in there. That's, we didn't even, I mean, I think that comes out, if I didn't remember right, it's like 5 or 6 teachers that should have been just by flat numbers. You know, you have to go by grade levels. So I think we've been very careful, but you're exactly right, Mr. Galvan. I mean, this is a very fluid situation, and when we built this out with ESSER funding, we were building it out to meet needs, and I think we did a very good job of making sure that our money was used wisely. We knew coming to the end of it that we might have to make some very hard decisions, and we've been looking at this all year long to determine whether we were going to have to get rid of all of those positions and then just say, this is the way it's going to be and this is what it's going to look like. But from an administrative standpoint, in order to continue to have academic excellence, we felt like this is what is needed in order to make that happen.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying, and I'm not saying I disagree.
Yeah.
But I guess on the flip side of that is we're constantly in an area to where we're challenged with surrounding school districts that are a lot wealthier than us. And we struggle to compete with having a competitive salary to attract those teachers. And irregardless of the career ladder step that they're on, the only way we can do that is by increasing the salaries that we
Right.
have on a yearly basis to stay competitive. And I realize this is preliminary, but if we absorb those positions like we're talking about, we're gonna be put ourselves in a position to where when we talk about pay increases, whether it's our maintenance workers or our paraprofessional or professional, we're gonna have limited funds of how much of an increase that we can give to them. So it's a catch-22. Where do you spend that money? And I think the board needs to hear that so they can have an understanding of what we're looking at and what we'll be faced with as we go down that road.
And you're exactly right, very well said, because that's the point of what I was trying to make with the bigger picture, is to show that when you try to bring this back together and you're trying to meet all these different goals and visions, you know, you want lower class size, we want to have STEAM labs. I mean, we could have absorbed the STEAM lab. We could, you know, which is a huge thing. There's a lot of places that you can go back and start cutting. If you have to do that, and if that's the decision made in the years to come, then, you know, your academic side will hurt too. So it's how to find the balance. And being any public school, we're not getting we're having all these lofty goals put forth for us and expectations with accountability, and they want us to do all this, but we're not receiving, as you can see from our first sheets, we're not receiving a lot of help to be able to raise those bars and to pay our teachers the way they need to be paid. So it's like Mr. Galvan's saying, it's like we have to sit here and decide, okay, what are we going to give up so we can give that? And that's very unfortunate. That should not be the way it is, but it is where we are.
No, the state continues to do this. I mean, Terry and David have been here 20 years, John, 10. I mean, we continue to see state mandates with no funds for it. I mean, we continue to hear raise the bar in excellence, but they don't provide us any money. I mean, the ESSER funds were federal funds.
Yes.
How did the state sit there and tie their hands to it and say that we're going to do away with hold harmless and use the federal funds to do that? How did they get away with doing that? It makes no sense to me.
Especially when they have such a surplus that they
Well, they got a
could
rainy
have.
day fund that they don't touch, and it's just
Yeah.
billions and billions
Yes,
of dollars
and
sitting
they
there.
just, I mean, I don't know what rainy day they're waiting on. I think we had one. So,
I have a question.
okay.
Okay. So this was a lot of stuff. In the $538,288, these were the ESSER paid that we need to move back into local. This was a part of the 831,956 that you gave us. Can you run those positions by me one more time, just so I can make sure that I got that? That was superintendent.
It's actually, and it's director of nurses, superintendent, assistant superintendent, 3 nurses and 3 counselors. I just now caught that director of nursing, that's why it was up here at the top, because the director of nursing was part of the 346,260. It's not
Gotcha.
part of the 538.
That's what I was getting to. I was like,
When I
are
said
we
that
absorbing
again,
that one again?
I was like,
or?
why do I have that in 2 places? You're right. But the director of nursing should not be there. The director of nursing was absorbed in the 346,260.
Okay, perfect.
And
That
before I
is my
send it out to
question.
you, I'll make sure I check my numbers again. I wish I could do that now, but we have a ghost over here because Cheryl or I, neither one can get our computers to work.
I have a question that's moving forward and
Yes.
absorbing. So, first of all, the 831,956 ESSER salaries to be absorbed into the local budget. It's just not absorbing, it's returning positions to the local budget.
Well, that's, yeah.
And
you could
also
say
absorbing
you're absorbing
new ones.
some and you're returning
Right, so it's
some.
both.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The other thing is that those positions that were new positions during COVID, those 7 positions, the 3 teachers, 3 paras, the 1 assistant principal, the literacy coordinator, all those that were new positions because of these federal dollars,
Right.
were brought in without guarantee,
Right.
correct? If we move them over into the local budget, they'll become our regular FTEs, our regular positions, which is different.
Right.
So once we move them over, they're here unless so when we say, just so everybody understands, when we say absorb, they're gonna become our regular salaries moving forward, this year, next year, just like all of the existing employees were pre-COVID. All the positions, not
Right,
employees,
the three
positions.
teachers, the three paras, and the assistant principal, yes.
You have to sustain those positions. moving
Right,
forward.
that's my point, is so it's not just a one-time thing that we're
No.
looking at here. This is gonna be part of our regular local budget moving forward.
But your number, with your three teachers, your three paras, you're with the enrollment sitting at 1,700 and growing, you more than can sustain that due to the growth. And then, as far as the assistant principal, we feel very strongly that is needed. That's something you can all monitor and decide next year, if you feel like there's a better way to restructure that.
Well, we had one there and it went away, and then we were, I think Victor was on the board, that we had 2 assistant principals at the high school. We were up to a little over 1,700 kids, and then all of a sudden it went down. And so we lost, so we didn't, and then, we're back up where we are, back before.
Yeah,
before-
we're
really
almost
before Harvey.
we're almost pre-Harvey
Yeah,
numbers now.
so those numbers, and the other, like I said,
Well, that's why every year, and I know it will continue, every year, that is a huge part of what we do, starting pretty much November, December on, is in-house. We look at what does our enrollment look like. We drill down to class size numbers. So at first grade, how many students do you have? Second grade, I pulled each principal in. We sat around the round table. We had what we called staffing meetings, and we sat there and said, okay, what have you got? Let's roll your numbers up. So if you have 192 at first grade, 192 are rolling up to second grade. How many teachers, if we divide them all out, how many students are going to be in your classrooms? Because we have some grade levels, some grades that the numbers at that grade level are very high compared to the ones that are going out. So that's where we've had to add some teachers in, because our lower numbers now are rolling up, and you could have gotten away with 4 teachers, but now you need 5 or 6 teachers because you've added 50 to 60 kids at that grade level. And so every year we look at that, and we look at what are the issues we're facing, mental health, discipline, all of that. So what do we need to support that? And so those are the deep, long conversations, months and months. So before we bring this to you, we have just about beat this horse to death, as they would say, trying to and I know for myself, and Cheryl knows, I am probably one of the most frugal people you're ever going to have. Hopefully Mr. Bennett has learned to be frugal, I'm sure, here watching, because we've tried to squeeze every penny possible to ensure that you get the most out of every little bit that they do give us to make this district as great as it can be. And then when we saw that that wasn't enough, that's when we started writing all these grants, because we knew the only way we're going to take it to the next level is with grant funding. It's not coming through state aid.
A question on those, did you have a question to continue?
Oh, it's okay. Go
No,
ahead.
go ahead, we were starting with yours.
I was going to ask, as you were talking about our growth, we just recently, a couple months ago, added another classroom on at Falk. We just amended to give them supplies for that. So as we're looking at the budget and we're seeing the funds available for raises and where that number sits, does that also, is this allotment also what we'd be looking at if we do need to add another teacher once we start getting into August, September, and we see those enrollment numbers, where, especially for our littles, because that's been no secret for us that we are quickly outgrowing Falk, and I know that we're coming into the year the COVID babies start going to school. So I'm sure we're going to see an increase over the next 2 years, enrollment in that pre-kindergarten, kindergarten age group. So is this amount also what we'd be looking at if we needed to add on additional?
Yes, if we're going to add, put aside money for another teacher, I mean, you'd have to look at it from this perspective. That's why, as we continue to, and don't get too upset at this point. I mean, yeah, this doesn't look, I mean, we wish we had a lot more, but we're not finished crunching. There's more to come. You're getting like the bare bones tonight, and we talked about that. So, well, this is good though. They'll see this part, the ugly, and then when it starts coming together and we come back to you in July, it's going to look better.
Oh, no, I agree. I was just trying to make sure that we as a board are cognizant of that as we do discuss raises, that we haven't even hit school time yet, to see what those enrollment numbers are. And we are bursting at the seams. So since we're already seeing that trend in our lower elementary, it's sure to probably come back. So we may need to be extra frugal on what we choose to do and not do, just with some of the unknowns to come in the school year.
And that's another hard part when you're building a budget, because you don't know the unknowns. You don't know if you're going to need 1 or 2 more teachers. You don't know if a bus is going to break down. You don't, and all the ACs go out. You know, that's where it's just, you build it the wisest way you can with the amount of money you have, and then if you believe in prayer, I'd say pray. And then make sure your implementation, you're very frugal and you monitor it very, very closely. And that's what we've been doing, watching it very closely, weekly, where we are and what we're spending and whether we really need it or not.
I just wanted to ask, we don't need names, but those additional positions, those 3 teachers and those 3 paraprofessionals, which campuses are they at?
I would be able to tell you if my computer
Oh,
was
okay.
not spinning, so I can.
We
get
know
that
where the
for you.
assistant principal position is. That's at the high school.
I can put that on this spreadsheet when I send it out
Okay.
to you. Great questions. I know this is a lot to take in tonight, but that's why we have this one, so you can think about it and then know that you don't have to wait till the end of July. You can shoot us emails, call, stop by, whatever, and we'll continue to do deep dives until you feel really comfortable. Any information we may get from the legislators, I'll make sure that we send that out to you so you can go ahead and know what's coming, what's happening. We'll try to do like little tidbits of that through the month of July too, so that'll help you be more prepared for the July workshop. Or if you think of questions, shoot them to us and we'll answer the question back to everyone. But if you don't have anything else on that, our last part was to look at the debt service, and I'm going to turn that back over to Ms. Stansberry.
Thank you. That's fine.
There's a document for debt service, and what I'm need to bring it to your attention so you can be thinking about it. Maintenance, the local maintenance budget's not the only one that's going to have more revenue. The debt service is. So in this document, I've given 2 columns. The last 2 columns on the right. If you'll remember, last year we worked with Dusty Trailer to develop a defeasance document, and we put that in the budget where we're going to be paying an additional amount for the premium to be able to keep our tax rate the same. There's a lot of reasons we were wanting to keep our tax rate up instead of dropping it, mainly is planning in the future for a bond election that might be to our advantage in 2 ways of the tax rate, and also when our taxpayers are looking at to see what kind of debt we already have, then we're being very frugal of using our tax dollars to pay off that debt sooner. So with that being said, at the very bottom, and I apologize because it's at the bottom, that's what this year looked like. Our principal payment, our normal principal payment was $485,000, and our interest payments totaled up to be $547,975, and our defeasance payment is approximately $558,000. And I've been asking, when do we pay that? And they were shooting for June the 29th. I'm still waiting for the wiring information to see when actually that payment gets made. So with that that reminder of what happened last year, this year, if we try to do the same thing and do not decrease the tax rate, then our defeasance payment that would be looking at would go up from a 558,000 to like 888,000 additional premium payment on top of what our normal payment would be. That would be keeping our tax rate at 13 cents, at the 1.36523. That would enable us to do another defeasance set. If that's not what you would want to happen, we would need to keep our revenues in line with our actual expenditure. We would need to drop our tax rate by 7 cents and bring it down from 13 cents down to like 6.6 cents. So I've given you the numbers for the budget, our expenses, and how that's related to your estimated revenue that you have here before you. So when we come back in our discussions, we're going to be talking to Mr. Traylor in the near future to see what this is actually going to look like and what we would have to bring to you in order to continue another defeasance payment. I was playing with the numbers with our bond payment. If by taking the $558,000 and paying it up front, then that's going to shorten the time that we finish paying our bond off. Right now, our final payment would be in 2040, and this would bring it like, part of it would be like a half of a payment more, would be bringing it down to like 2039. If we paid an additional $888,000, that would take probably another year off of our bond payments. And those are the questions that we're going to be asking Dusty or Mr. Traylor, and I want to get him to show us also how much interest that might be saving us also. A lot of things to think about.
Any questions or comments from board members?
So if you have any specific things you want to see or prepare, we have quite a bit. I've taken some notes tonight of things that we're going to send out to you. But as we prepare for the to come back July 26th with a second workshop, to hopefully with more, by that time we'll have our, will they actually be certified, or they'll have, so we reason we wanted to put it on July 26th is that hopefully we will have the certified values. We will have results of whatever the legislators are going to do. We will have the TEA template and Omar's new template, and then we will have finished doing our we're continuing our look at our staffing to see if there's any because we are still hiring a few, so we hadn't even completely finished all that out, and we're going to put it in the system so that we'll know for sure what that looks like, those actual numbers, because these were preliminary, so we want to have the actual numbers with benefits. So we'll have a better picture for you. Along with what we would bring you several options of what it would look like for salary increases based off of what those final crunches look like, so we can talk about that. So beyond that, what else would you are you interested in knowing, or questions?
A couple of months ago, I believe it was January, we had Mr. Diven come in. And he talked to us about our school buses. We discussed replacing or getting a new special education bus at the time. Refresh my memory on that. Did we already approve that bus in last year's budget, or is that going to be a part of?
We didn't do a.
I know he told us that we needed to do one of them immediately, and Mr. Galvan had asked a few questions on the price. And then we had several others that were just really old. So I was just curious, as we're building our budget, what we're doing with transportation and that aspect of just ensuring that at least the one that he said was.
We can bring back that part, looking at our bus fleet, because I know he and Mr. Bennett have been working on the bus fleet, what that needs to look like, our AC units, what that needs to look like, along with our technology plan, because our replacement part, because we have all this technology now, which is great, but it doesn't last forever. So you have all those that have to roll in. So that's part of those, when we talked about those line items earlier, so we have X number of dollars. So how to use that wisely and know, okay, this year we're gonna spend this much money to replace computers and one bus and one AC or whatever it is. So that's the other part that we didn't even discuss tonight, because that definitely gets very deep into all of that. But yes, we've been working on that, and we'll bring back a report for that too.
Okay. And when we do that as well, when we do our deep dive, will we also dig into our facilities, where we discussed previously that we had some ticket items, and I think we didn't exactly table it, but we did due to costs, but we were going to prioritize based on just kind of a need-based thing. So if we could just make sure we discuss it at least, so that we as a board don't overspend.
What my proposal is for that, and I discussed that with the team this morning, is that what we're doing is Mr. Bennett, Mr. Diven have been pulling back together the facility needs, because we do have those from those tilt walls. We have some issues with lighting. So we have some things that were back on that facility piece that we did pre-COVID. And then we have some others that are added. So they're coming up with that, trying to go ahead and get some information, possible quotes on what that would look like. And then we've already been talking to Dusty about some options there to help pay for that, because I'll just be honest with you, this budget will not take care of that. And we do not have the fund balance right now to take care of that. So you're going to have to look at other options. So what we're preparing, Cheryl and I are trying to prepare for the next team to bring to you. My proposal is that's too much really to put into this budget piece. So my proposal would be, because you're not gonna pay for it out of the budget.
Right.
So I would say, let's get through this budget piece. We're gonna have that pulled together where Dusty and one of the FEMA reps that has a CDL loan option, and work with your new team to bring to you a planning session where you look at those facility needs and some options to take care of those, and then do a deep dive on that. To me, that's the only way at this point, unless some major funding falls from heaven at this point. So that's been on our radar now for over 2 years, all through ESSER. We've known it was there. We know we need to take care of it, but it's just been, we've had to take care of other things first. So before we leave, we're trying to make sure that we bubble that back up, have them prepared to bring to you presentations. And of course, they can always, we'll be available to ever call if you want to say, remind us what we said about that. We'll be a phone call away. But yes, we are working on that. But my proposal, unless you just really want to dive into it on July 26th, would be to keep that as a separate piece, because that you're going to have to attack that from a whole different direction.
Well, isn't that plan, haven't we already met and established that board vision plan 3 years and 5 years out of what we prioritized? I know we worked in here with Ms. Zendejas and the Region Service 2 team to do that, and we worked that document.
Yeah, the vision
What we
and
wanted
goals.
to see, so I mean, it's probably, the document's there.
Yes.
It's just a matter of us revisiting and saying, hey, this is what our vision and our goals were 1 year, 2 years ago. Things have changed.
Yep.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to reprioritize this based on what we have available to us.
Yeah.
I
Right,
think
because
those
there's a
things are
few
there.
items we didn't have issues with at that time that you need to be made
Right.
aware of.
So I think that document's there,
Yes.
but I just need to rework it.
And that's what they're doing. They're working with the original facility plan to bring it back to you so you can reprioritize.
And incorporate it with what we already have.
Right, and then add to anything that's come up so you can adjust, and then bring you the funding options that are available, how you would attack that.
Okay.
Is it possible to get a preview informational item at our next board meeting, which will be before we meet with Region 4 on our team of 8?
A preview of of this document and what's needed,
No, preview to an update.
of the
On-
facility needs.
Mhm.
I think so, before your 19th, yes.
Before our July 19th team of 8 session.
Okay.
And then the other item, it's a smaller item, but it could be, if we're not already doing so, the mentoring piece that we talked about earlier this evening. If you could follow up on that to let us know if that's something that is still available, and if so, if we can
Definitely.
apply for those mentoring dollars from the state for our teachers. Any other items for staff to work on before we have our second preliminary budget workshop? Again, that is going to be on Wednesday, July 26th.
If you think of something and think, goodness, I wish we'd have said that, just shoot us an email and we'll get to work on it.
Okay, no?
Okay, thank you.
Everyone's still available for the 26th? Okay.
And the 19th, a team of 8.
And yes, so the 19th will be the team of 8, and the 26th will be our second preliminary budget workshop. Well, if there's nothing further, no further business or objections.
What was that date for what?
Oh, I'm sorry. July 19th is our team of 8
That
training,
written down.
and then July 26th is our second budget workshop.
That's the first I've heard about that. When they bring that up,
Which one?
July 26th. When was that brought up? It's the first I've heard about it.
I think we initially just floated that as a date for a second workshop, and so we're confirming that with you tonight. I mean, if that's an issue, we can, but that,
What time?
we chose that date because we're trying to get it past when we get certified
I
values.
understand it's gotta
Yeah.
get passed by
Yeah.
a certain date.
Yeah.
But I wasn't aware of that particular date.
What day is that on?
It's a Wednesday.
Day.
Wednesday, July 26th.
What time?
At
7.
PM.
7 p.m. It'll be here. We talked about it as in the event that we would need it following our first one, and it is apparent that we have follow-up questions and items for further discussion on the preliminary budget. So, is there anything else?
If I'm here, I'm here. If I'm not,
Okay.
I'm not. Plain and simple.
All right, then, if there is nothing further and there's no objection, then we are adjourned at, give you the time here, 8:40.
Supposed to be
Thank
between
you.
7 and